working on my master's degree in conflict resolution and a certificate in nonprofit management, trying to figure out how to take conflict resolution out into the environment. I'm also the outreach coordinator of SUN, also known as Students United for Nonviolence. And our mission is to unite students and the community in the common interest of nonviolent peace and justice activities and awareness. And we say that this will be accomplished by promoting opportunities for open dialogue, educational activities, and skills training on the Portland State University campus in nonviolent approaches to social justice. I just want to say that we just got SUN resurrected this year, and we have definitely been very successful in working with our community. And I just want to say thank you to everybody who put this event together. This is definitely evidence of us all working together. I understand that PDX Peace Coalition is staying together and working with a lot of other social justice and peace organizations, including the students. So I really would like to ask for anyone who was part of, volunteering, planning, organizing this event, if you just stand up for a moment.
How about raising your hand?
Raise your hand. So, if we can all just acknowledge those who put this together. Thank you. When I first heard that PDX Peace Coalition and other groups were involved, I went, phew, because I think a lot of you know that when we put events together, that it tends to be a handful of us that do all the work for months on end, and then by the time the event's happening, you're wiped out. So thank you so much. I really felt your support, in bringing this all together. What I'd like to do now is introduce you to my first speaker, and she is a woman who, to keep it together here, touched my heart. It's really touched my heart. The first time I met her was February 5th up at Fort Lewis, Washington. There were like 2,000 of us up there, protesting on behalf of Lieutenant Aaron Watada. And at that time, Agustin was sitting in a military prison in Germany. And it was just freezing out there, all of us were out there for probably like 8, 9, 10 hours, And this woman brought her children and her mother-in-law all the way up from California to come meet our peace community and to reach out and ask for help, I had been following Augustin's story on the Courage to Resist website, and so I recognized their family, and I was like, oh my God, is this you? And I just really saw the grief in Helga's face, And through her grief, though, I just also saw so much determination that she was really going to make a difference. She was really going to put this issue out, for everybody to know what was happening to her husband and to rally all the support possible. So that day, I intentioned I will do everything I can to help her, and I am just so honored to be able to welcome her, and I'd like for you to welcome her with me. Please welcome Helga.
How many of you know the whole story of my husband? Can you raise your hand? No? Wow. Okay. So I will tell the story then. My husband enlisted in November of 2002 in the delayed entry program. And when he enlisted, he was very eager to do great things for our country, like many of the servicemen that joined. He also did want to further his education, and that was one of the other reasons that he enlisted. He wasn't a typical enlistee. He was older. He was 30. At the time, we had been married for about 12 years, and we had 2 daughters. We have 2 daughters, which are 12 now. They're twins. And when he enlisted, like I said, 9/11 had already happened, but we weren't at war. And I remember having a conversation with him, asking him, well, there's this conflict in the Middle East. What do you think about that? What if you're asked to kill? And he told me, well, they'll train me for that. If my country asks me to do something like that, surely it would be for a good reason. And so he joined the military. I supported him in that, and we were happy. But shortly after he enlisted, he realized something that for someone that just enlisted is pretty dreadful, that he couldn't kill, which is a great thing. And he realized he couldn't kill, and I remember getting these letters from him from basic training. There's this training that they do in the gas chamber. They sent people, the soldiers, into the gas chamber, and they make them inhale the gas, and they get really sick. And he sent me this letter saying how depressed he was after he got out of that experience, that he felt really sick, and that also he couldn't believe that, you know, this had been used in Germany to exterminate people, and he couldn't believe that he was a participant of that. And I remember reading that and thinking, what's happening here? His tone is changing. This is not the guy that was gung-ho ready to join the military. And so I started to worry. But at the same time, I'm getting letters from the Department of the Army saying, your soldier may be confused, may be, you know, expressing concerns. Encourage your soldier to continue forging ahead. And so I thought maybe it was just, you know, separation anxiety. You know, he was in a different state, experiencing new things, and so I encouraged him to keep on going. And he as well thought that it was, you know, just something different, and you know, he was experiencing anxiety because it was something new. But that's not what it was. It was the beginning of what we recognize as conscientious objection feelings. He became a conscientious objector in October of 2003. By that time, he had orders to deploy to Iraq. And he became a conscientious objector. I'll never forget it. He left to this training, and he came back, and he was a changed person. He told me, I went on this training, and they had the soldiers. He said they said that the soldiers. Is it? Keep on talking. Okay. The soldiers were sent out into the German forest, which is absolutely absurd, because they were trying to simulate Iraq conditions, and you know, Germany and Iraq are nothing alike. And so he's out in the German forest, you know, and snow up to the waist, and they're trying to simulate Iraq conditions. And he tells me we were going and like these drive-bys, driving in circles. And at first I didn't participate, but then I was asked to. He's a paramedic, a medic in the military. And he said, they asked me to participate, so I grabbed my M16, and then they told me there will be pop-ups. There will be insurgent pop-ups, and there will be friendly pop-ups, and you have to decide which ones you kill. Point to kill, shoot to kill, aim at the head or the heart. And that's when it became real to him that he was actually going to go to Iraq and going to have to kill on command. And when that happened, he came home and he said, I don't know what to do because I can't kill. I'm not capable of killing. And he had to deploy in a couple of months. And so we looked into conscientious objection. It's an Army regulation in which people are allowed to get a discharge, an honorable discharge in the military. And he applied for it right before he left to Iraq. He decided to go to Iraq, but never load his gun. And so he was there for 366 days and never loaded his gun. And halfway into his deployment, he realized that his application was denied. And we were both so outraged that when he came back, we decided to pursue it to the next level, which was taken into the federal court and sue the Department of the Army. Actually, the Secretary of the Army, Steve Harvey at the time. And so we did. But we lost again. A year later, we found out that we lost. By this time, It was August of 2005. And he had pending deployments for a second deployment. And so we went through all the legal motions, filed emergency temporary restraining orders, and again filed another motion, was denied a week before his official deployment. So that brings us to September 1st. On September 1st, he had told his chain of command he would not deploy. Everyone knew that he was a conscientious objector. Even though his application was denied, everyone believed him in his chain of command. Every person that knew him personally and that had worked with him knew that he was a conscientious objector and recommended that he be discharged. The investigating officer said that for the sake of the military, the Army, this man should be discharged. And for the sake of this man's emotional well-being, he should be discharged. And the Department of the Army went against their official recommendation. So September 1st, everyone knows he's not deploying, but because up until that point he had never disobeyed a rule except for not picking his gun up to train, they thought that he might show up, but he didn't. September 1st, Agustin doesn't go to the deployment, and he tells me, they're going to come looking for me. Tell them I'll turn myself in the morning, and I'm going for a long drive and then a long walk, and I'll turn myself in. And so they came to our door, and I was there in Germany, and I told them. He said he wasn't going. They said, we didn't think he'd actually not go. But that's what happened. Next morning, I call him, we meet outside the base, and I drive him to the MP station, and I help him turn himself in. One of the hardest things I had to do, but that's what we decided we wanted to do. There's actually a video on couragetoresist.org where it shows him turning himself in and saying goodbye to the girls. If anyone wants to see that, you can actually see that on there. So what happens then? They still don't believe that he's not going. He turned himself in, his unit comes and picks him up, and he calls me about an hour later and says, they still think I'm going. And I said, what do you mean they still think you're going? He says, they still think I'm going. They're bringing me home to pick up my stuff. And I said to him, you know, this is my nightmare come true. What are they going to do, force you? He said, I don't know, I'll be there in a few minutes. He gets there in a few minutes. He's with one sergeant. And the sergeant is pretty upset and says to him, grab your Iraq gear. You're going to Iraq. Get it through your head. Grab your Iraq gear, put your uniform on. Right here. And so we start discussing, I'm talking to him in Spanish, saying, don't put your uniform on, don't do it. Because if you put your uniform on, then they'll expect the next step. And the GI rights hotline person in Germany is telling him, who also speaks Spanish, don't do it. And so the sergeant is seeing this whole situation fold in front of him, and he gets really calm and says, son, you're in enough trouble. Why don't you just put your uniform on, leave your Iraq gear, I'm not going to ask you to take it along, just grab a pillow and your toothbrush, and just put your uniform on. It'll be okay. And so Agustin puts his uniform on, and we think, okay, maybe it's not going to, they're not going to keep on pushing. But lo and behold, 2 hours later, an hour later, I can't recall exactly, they come with two sergeants, and they're yelling at him, getting in his face, you're going to Iraq, get your gear. See, he already has his uniform on. You're going to Iraq if we have to carry you on the plane, if we have to handcuff you, if we have to shackle you, you're going to Iraq. Our daughters were there. I was there. And it was one of the most horrible situations I've ever been in. And so Agustin starts grabbing his stuff, and I'm thinking, my God, what is he doing? And then he goes in the hallway, and he gives me this look, and he says, Helga, I'm grabbing my things to go to Iraq. And I look in his eyes, and I know that that's not what he's doing. He's telling me this, but that's not what's going to happen. And so I think, oh my God, I have to entertain these guys, distract them. So I asked them to come in the house. I said, come in, have a seat. And we, you know, the girl, one of my daughters is playing with the video games, the other one's skating in front of the building, and I'm like, what do I do to distract these men? And we have 3 little dogs, and they're barking at them, and I'm like, what do I do? And I thought, I'm just gonna let it out. So I just start crying and wailing and just screaming at the top of my lungs, just this pain that I felt, just let it out. They were so ashamed and so embarrassed that they just stared at the floor. And all of a sudden, I hear this thump. And I know that he's done something crazy. He jumped out the back window. And he's gone. And I think, okay, I heard the jump. How long do I give him? And so I kept on crying and just letting it out and just letting it out. And I looked at them and I kept on thinking, I'm still crying, I'm still letting it out, and they're still sitting there staring at the floor. And I couldn't believe it. 40 minutes passed. And then I finally decide to call him. And I know he's not going to answer. And I go back there and I tell them, he's gone. Our bedroom window is open, wide open. They said, what do you mean he's gone? And I said, he's gone. And they didn't know what to do, and they start running back and forth and start looking for him on the bay, start searching our neighbors' houses, start interrogating us. They start searching our apartment without search warrants, yelling in our faces, grabbing one of my daughters. It becomes, for the next week and a half, it was a sheer hell for Rebecca, Raquel, and myself. They wouldn't let me leave the country. They brought me into Germany. They wouldn't let me leave. I didn't have any money to leave. They immediately cut my husband's paycheck. I had senior chaplains, officials on the military post say that this was cruel and unusual punishment for the family, and writing letters, and they wouldn't let me go. So I started threatening them. I tried the nice approach, and that didn't work. And so I went into the officers, the commander's office, and I said, you know, you either let me go, or I hold a press conference outside the military base. And I did it. They gave me my tickets, and I was out of the country, and then I had to start this full-fledged campaign for Agustin, because I knew it was going to get ugly. And so what happened was I get to the U.S. and immediately start holding press conferences. In the meantime, Augie is in Germany trying to figure out how to get to the U.S. because he doesn't have a passport, because he never intended on going AWOL. And he doesn't have anything. They take away his ID. He has nothing. So what does he do? He has dual citizenship. We thought he didn't, because when we became U.S. citizens, we renounced our previous citizenship. He goes into the Mexican consulate, and they help him. They help him, and they get him into Mexico. And then, you know, as secure as our borders are, he just crosses the border with a California driver's license and holds a press conference. And that same day, he turned himself in. Up until that point, we had no idea what would happen. We didn't know if they would ship him. They had told us that they would take him back to Iraq and court-martial him there. But that didn't happen. They took him back to Germany. I hate to ask, but do we have this? No? This? We do? Okay. I'll keep on talking. We'll show you a movie of that press conference that day. And where we're at now, Agustin was freed April 11th? 18th. He's still considered active duty. He's on what they call excess leave. They didn't let him go, and they won't let him go until he finishes his appeal process. We have filed numerous lawsuits in the federal court and the Court of Appeals, and our next step is to go to the Supreme Court. And we have to decide if we're willing to take it that far. There's a lot of cost involved, and it's hard to get denied time after time after time, because we know he's a CO. I mean, we know what his beliefs are. I have seen the transformation. And I know people don't understand, why would someone join an all-military army, all-volunteer army, and then be a conscientious objector? You know, that's a very hard question, but all I can say is I saw how he was when he joined and how he was after he joined. And so I stood by him, continue to fight, you know, with him, side by side. And, you know, he's lost all his benefits. He was convicted of desertion and missing movement. Desertion is still punishable by death on the books. He was facing 7 years in prison, which would have made our daughters 18 when he was getting out. And we had no guarantees that that wouldn't happen. He ended up serving 8 months in prison, and right now he's a convicted felon. He has 2 felonies on his record. And so we continue to fight, because this has set a bad precedent for all future war resistors. When Agustin resisted, he never intended on going AWOL for 26 days, and he did. Deserters are usually convicted of desertion if they're gone for more than 30 days. Agustin wasn't gone for 30 days. And that's why we also feel that it's so important for us to continue this fight, because, I mean, it's not fair for someone that, you know, is against war to have to be subjected to go into Iraq 1, 2, 3 times. We know soldiers that have been deployed 4 times. I had a neighbor that was deployed 4 times and had a 4-year-old son. I had a neighbor who threw herself from the 3rd floor to prevent her husband from being deployed, and they deployed him anyway because her injuries weren't severe enough. I had neighbors that once their husbands were deployed, her daughter became suicidal and started cutting, and the military said, "Oh, well, it's not so bad. This is really common among the kids in the military." And they gave her an appointment 3 weeks later to see the daughter and their psychiatric evaluation. The stories that I lived, it's not things I heard. I saw. Another neighbor was I'm looking for the word, diagnosed with cancer. And they didn't bring her husband back for her surgery. I mean, there's so many things that are so wrong on so many levels. And we're not even talking about the Iraqi people, their suffering, what they're going through. And, you know, my husband can better explain his experiences, what he saw in Iraq. I don't know, should I keep on talking? I don't know if it's here. Okay.
It is here.
Oh, it is here?
It's here, yes.
Okay, so I'd like to share the movie with you, and then we can continue.
Can we get the mics working, or otherwise we can't show it?
No. Turn the volume up. Well,
The volume on the laptop, yeah, that's what we're trying to work on, but the mics aren't working, so.
Today, I have the other son. The other son refused to go to Iraq. The other son, they have the opportunity for save the family, save the life, and save the morale. Agustin Aguayo is the first Mexican, American, for say no to the war. I'm not gonna kill the innocent people. I'm gonna save my family.
I am an Iraq war veteran and a conscientious objector. I have come to believe that it is wrong to destroy life, that it is wrong to use war, that it is immoral, and I can no longer go down this path. I have tried for 2.5 years to demonstrate to the Army that I'm a genuine conscientious objector. Many people in my chain of command have supported me, have said very positive things about me. In these almost 4 years I've been in the armed services, my behavior has been excellent. I have received a good award conduct medal, among other. And at this point, I never thought I would go AWOL. I would never thought I would go to these extremes. But I felt I had no choice. And because I have taken this stand, I am free, even though my body will be probably locked up for a period of time. And it's something I can live with. Something I can't live with is being a participant of war anymore. And at the moment I signed up, I was ready and willing to do anything that was asked of me. However, over time, we as humans change. I have always been a person that questions my purpose in life. I began to reflect upon the things I was experiencing and learning. And ultimately, I had to ask myself, is this moral? Is this right? I went to combat. I returned. And that changed me forever. And no one can tell me I'm not an objector to war. I cannot accept that. That is like someone telling any of you that you are not a Christian, or you're not a Catholic, or you are not Muslim if you assert those beliefs. That's in essence what has happened to me. I have been told that I'm not an objector. I don't think it is acceptable to God for humans to destroy each other in this senseless war. That is why I cannot participate in this war or any war. Some people would call me a coward, and I can tell them I was there and I did my job and I was not afraid, and I cannot be there anymore. I cannot support the destruction of life.
I stand before you today as a very proud wife. My husband is taking a courageous step, and I am extremely proud of him. I'm proud of him because he has been fighting to be recognized as a conscientious objector for 2.5 years. He deployed in 2004 to 2005 as a conscientious objector. And while there, he refused to load his gun because he is a true conscientious objector. And we have followed all the rules. He has followed the whole legal recourse that he has to be recognized as a conscientious objector, yet we've been denied. Twice by the Army, once by court. Knowing the kind of man that he is, I just knew the pain he was in. Because I can't imagine my husband putting a person in a body bag, closing the zipper, and then discarding them in the back like if they were trash. So I knew my husband was not well. And that was the beginning of it. That was 2 weeks into his deployment. And he told me one time that he was out on a patrol and all the soldiers are required to point their guns at checkpoints to cars, and he saw 2 little girls in the back of the car with bulging eyes that were terrified, and he said, "What am I doing?" He didn't have any bullets in his gun, but the girls didn't know that. My girls are very strong. They wrote him a letter, and at the bottom of the letter, they put on there, "We are strong. We will get through this. Never forget that." And they're only 11.
I feel sad looking at all the crosses and them telling us, like, one said, "I love you, Daddy." And I couldn't imagine if my dad was dead. He's like the glue that puts us all together. And that he really changes our family, and I think he just makes us stronger.
I had just arrived in Iraq, and it was 4 in the morning, and we heard frantic, one of our sergeants screaming into the area where we slept, and he was screaming, wake up, we have casualties. The first one had his legs missing, and an arm. Initially, we thought he was a KIA, a killed in action. He still had a pulse when he was brought in. His face was severely burned. Within an instant, the ground was filled with blood, and this unique smell I'll never forget filled the air. And within seconds, another young man was brought to us, and he was put on the floor. He was an African-American young man, and I was the only one available, so I tended to him, and he didn't have a pulse. That moment was just so dramatic for me. I'll never forget it. Having 2 young men just die within minutes. The first one was still alive. And I was tending to the first one, and a PA saw me, a physician's assistant came to me, and he said, you have to stop. You have to stop, you have to take him to the back. And then it came to me. He had passed away, but it wasn't a reality for me. I just couldn't accept it. Then I was asked to take him outside. Outside, I was asked to put him in a body bag. I saw his face, and I just felt so much pain. You know, all the hopes, all the dreams that a person has, over in one instant. And I saw his face, and I was asked to carry his body and put it in a body bag and zip it. Immediately after that, I went back into the room, and I was asked to carry the second body outside, put it on the floor, and put it in a body bag and zip it. Life, so precious, so valuable, and so fragile, over like that. I just couldn't accept it. That memory, that smell, will be a sad reminder of what war is really all about.
When they're in Iraq, my husband called every day. I stopped hearing from him, and that was because when someone dies or is injured, the soldiers are not allowed to call home. I'll never forget it because they didn't say who the soldiers were. And so I didn't know if it was Agustin or not, and I hadn't heard from him, and the anguish that I felt was horrible. And then finally, he snuck on a computer and instant messaged me. And I'll never forget that message because he said, 2 soldiers have died. And I said, are you okay? And he said, yes, can't be on the computer. I love you. I'll talk to you soon as I can. And then he ended it with, I'm scarred for life. And I remember just sitting there and saying, I'm scarred for life. And and then he said, when he said the 2 soldiers died, he said, I was there. And when I read that, and I'm scarred for life, my heart just sunk, and I cried at the computer. And being out here, it's overwhelming. I saw this message out there that nearly brought me to my knees when it said, I miss you, Daddy. And it was in handwriting that seemed like it was a little child that wrote it, and it just horrible. I was walking out here with my girls, and we were discussing one of these could have been Daddy. And it's heartbreaking. He's alive, but there are 3,500 people that died needlessly. And it hurts. It really hurts.
what it's really about. You know, there's many reasons why people come in. There's many reasons, you know, you want college money. You're trying to get away from a bad neighborhood. You're tired of your parents. These different problems are still going to be there after the military. I believe it is one of the greatest tragedies of our lifetime that we use war in an attempt to solve problems. We need to stand. We need to find ways of improving this. This is how I make my stand, and I thank all of you for being here, supporting me. Thank you.
Can you all hear me okay though?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Testing. Thank you everyone for coming out here to hear us speak. And I just want to thank you all. A lot of the faces that I see here, I saw in Seattle for Aaron Watada's trial. And I can't thank you enough for supporting him and supporting us. That's where we kicked off Augustin's campaign. And I really want to thank all of you for being interested in these issues and supporting all war resistors. And it's my honor to introduce you to my husband, Agustin Aguayo.
Thank you for being here. It's my pleasure to be here in this beautiful town of yours. I see many nice things that are better than what I see in my state, California. So I think you guys are very lucky. And also tonight is special to me because I don't consider myself a very good speaker, but my wife is. I'm glad she came. She almost didn't make it. She's been ill and she's fighting an illness that affects her, that is aggravated by stress. So I really appreciate that she sacrificed and she came here. Also, Hanan is here from Seattle, so I really appreciate that. That's a treat for everyone because he speaks very well too. And I'll just share my story, and hopefully I can give you guys something positive to think about. I'd like to thank the translator, of course. We have a Spanish-speaking couple in the audience, and we're glad that they're here and they can understand what we are sharing today. Well, as my wife explained, I entered the military a little older than most recruits. I wasn't the only older one, by the way. I just wanted to say that. And as an immigrant, it was very important for me at that moment in my life to really show my patriotism, to show that I was proud to be an American, proud to be a U.S. citizen, and it was my way to give back. And even though I struggled with, like she mentioned, the training and all that, I put it in my head that I had enlisted to do positive things. And no matter what, with all the pain in my heart that I had, I was going to go to Iraq, and in my mind, I wasn't going to harm anyone. And my job was, as a medic, I was going to be helping people. It's sad for me to say this, but after being there a year, I knew I could never go back because I came back with the sense that I helped nobody, and no one. And this is very hard for me to talk about my brothers and sisters in the armed forces that, well, I am in the infantry, so it was all brothers that died. And it's really hard for me to talk about that because I saw them die and they were, fatally wounded. And I just have to live with the fact that I didn't help any of them. And the Iraqi civilians I also saw die. I'll just share a brief experience. There was a car bomb once, an occasion, and some Iraqi policemen got hurt. And my unit approached the scene, and we just stayed back. And our commander said, we're not going in because we didn't cause. The idea is we didn't harm them, therefore we don't have to help. So we stayed back and we waited for Iraqi civilian ambulance to come in and help. I'd like to say that at any moment during my tour in Iraq, I could have thrown away my conscientious objector request. It made me a very unpopular person. Fortunately, people that got to know me really liked me because they saw that I really wanted to do positive things. But my experience there was not positive at all. I remember as soon as we got there, I was with a platoon of medics, and then we were spread out with the infantry. But before we entered Iraq, we were in Kuwait, and we were told, if it moves, you fire at it. So that's not what we had been taught during our medic training in the Army School of Medics. And when I got to Iraq, we sat down with the officers and the platoon leaders of the medics that were leaving. And they said to us, if you guys have ideas of, that you have to follow Geneva Conventions and all these things, you have to get these ideas out of your head because this is the real thing. We fire our weapons, we have to provide our own security. So that went directly in direct conflict with what is taught in the training that we received. But this is Iraq, and we're being told this is the real thing. And it went even further. We were getting these lectures, these briefings. One of the docs, he came to us and he said, you guys, you medics, you have to talk to your infantry guys. Put it in their heads that if they use their weapons, they have to finish the job. Because if they don't, then there's more work for you guys. So I looked around me and I thought, am I the only one that's being troubled by what I'm listening? It was a sad experience for me. My platoon sergeant respected where I was coming from, ironically. And when my CO application got rejected, which meant I had to spend the whole year in Iraq, he came to me and he told me, I respect you, but you just have to understand that sometimes the best medicine is firepower. So that was something he knew he knew I couldn't hurt anyone. He knew it. But I was still sent out on the streets, and many people might think, I'm crazy, I put people in danger. It gave me a sense of sanity, knowing that I wasn't going to hurt anyone. When she mentioned about no ammo in the rifle. And to that, I respect, I know there's parents of service members here, and I respect them, and I have all the respect for your sons and daughters. And what I'd like to say about that is putting others in harm's way. You know, was I really the evil one? Was I really putting people in harm's way? You know, for example, chaplains, they're in the army, they're in hostile combat zones. They don't carry weapons either, so are they putting people in danger? I mean, we have to step back, I think, and see who's really putting people in danger here. Thank you very much. I'd like to talk a little bit about going to prison. I remember the last time I was in trouble with the law was, I know there's some activists here that are very courageous and are willing to stop war and they're willing to get arrested. In my mind, I never wanted to get arrested. I thought myself a responsible parent. I wanted to give my daughters a good example in life, always. When I came back from Iraq, there was a lot of my friends that wanted out because of the experiences, the post-traumatic stress. They just didn't want to be in it anymore, so they started using drugs, and that was an easy way out of the military. Going AWOL right after the deployment, you know, some people got out that way. But I wanted to follow all the rules. And in the end, it cost me, you know, being in prison for a long time. But here's the positive thing that has come out of all this. While I was in prison, I was reading a book. It was about how to handle financial advice. But the point I want to make is the book mentioned, you know, take these horrible things happen in life to you, whatever they are. Your business burns down, but you have to think that because that happened, there's something that is very positive that could happen. And I think that description fits me. Because this has happened to me, now I am able to speak to younger people about my experiences, show them the other side of the military, which is something that I'm very interested in because, I mean, we are living in a horrible time. It doesn't feel like it from our day-to-day lives here. But our brothers and sisters in the armed forces are suffering a great deal. As you know, if you have sons and when you're in the armed forces, you know, sometimes we don't tell our families everything. But they're really tired. They're really exhausted. They're sick of being extended and redeployed. That's not what they signed up for. I have so many things I wanted to share with you, and hopefully during the panel more of my ideas come out, and I can share them with you. Jan, the gentleman in the back, before I came up here, he shared some quotes with me, and I'd like to share one, and maybe it could make us think for a few minutes about what's happening. I like to say that before coming into the military, I wasn't very political. So I trusted, when I came in the military, I trusted that our government would do the right thing, would take us to war only under, you know, as a last resort. Unfortunately, I think you would agree with me that that hasn't happened. And when you're in the military, they talk to you about behaving in a certain way, being ethical, being moral all the time. But from my experience in the military, I looked around all the way up the chain of command. Unethical behavior. There was a... I'm going to mention the quote, by the way.
Thanks for saying that about unethical behavior.
Thank you. There was the warden of the prison sat with me. I broke my hand in prison, so he went with me to the hospital, and we started talking. And he said, well, he wanted to make conversation with me, and he said, so you just didn't want to go? And I explained to him, you know, I've been to Iraq, I've been in the army a while now, I'm a conscientious objector, this is what happened to me, my beliefs have changed, this is how I feel now. And he said to me, you know, I can really understand where you're coming from, because right now, this is a 22-year career person in the military, a master sergeant, and he told me, right now, I can understand where you're coming from, because the military could potentially ask you to do very unethical things right now in Iraq. And I thought, wow, I'm not the only one that sees this. Then he went on to say, but you missed out, because if you would have gone, then maybe a private contractor would have made you an offer to work for them, and you could have made a lot of money, because that's what happened to me. I have an offer to go work for this contractor. After I retire, I'm going to go and I want to make a lot of money. And that made me very sad. But speaking about, I'm not very political. I just know that war is wrong from being there. And I just want to read a quote and end my speech, if you will, with these words from Howard Zinn. Civil disobedience is not our problem. Our problem is civil obedience. Our problem is that numbers of people all over the world have obeyed the dictates of our leaders, of their governments, and have gone to war, and millions have been killed because of this obedience. Our problem is that people are obedient all over the world in the face of poverty and starvation and stupidity and war and cruelty. Our problem is that people are obedient while the jails are full of petty thieves, and all the while the grand thieves are running the country. That's our problem. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed the panel.
Thank you, Agustin and Helga, for sharing your story and your courage. I know that there's Veterans for Peace members here, and so they've all experienced the military. I am a former Army wife myself, and I just have to attest to the courage that it takes to stand up to the military system. This is really amazing what your family has done. Just want to ask that we all... Next, I want to introduce you to somebody who's very special to me. We go back to about 1990, and I consider him Hastings, who inspired me to go into the conflict resolution program. But Dan Shea is a Veterans for Peace member, founder of Education Without Borders, organizer, activist extraordinaire. And he's here to share some information about some activities that he's doing on behalf of the community and the resistors, as well as the immigrant community. Okay, so I'd like to introduce Dan Shea at this time.
Free speech. Just because they joined the military, they didn't give up their rights, their human rights, and they should, and that we are out there to support them. We had one of our service members at GI, Suzanne Swift in Eugene, who when she went AWOL after had experienced a rape in the military and refused to go back to Iraq, the military put a warrant out for her, and the city police of Eugene went out and served them. Well, a sanctuary city means that the police, and we're asking also the Multnomah County Sheriff's Department, will not act on any of those warrants by the military. And that's what it means. but it's the first step in citizens taking a political voice to let people know that city by city by city, that we are not only opposed to this war, but we are in support of those veterans who are speaking out against it. We are also hoping that after we get that resolution through the City Council, that we will begin a process of creating a safe house for returning veterans. That we begin to build and develop this house so that it is one of the problems that we have and why we're at war is because we're going after oil and the resources. And what we want to do is make it a greenhouse, a house that is self-sufficient. But we wanted a place for, no matter what your decision, when soldiers are returning, for whatever reason they chose to go or what they believe, that there's a place they can talk to other veterans. And we want that to be Iraqi Veterans Against the War that is speaking to them. So we will need your support in the future. So please sign up on the petition, and that will help keep us going. And I just wanted to say one more thing.
How do people write a check?
Pardon me? That's what I was going to say. What we want to do here is that there are a couple of ways in which you can make a contribution. First, you can make a personal check to Agustin Aguayo, or you can write, if you want a tax-deductible contribution, you can write it to Courage to Resist with Augustin's name in the memo. And that means Courage to Resist is a 501c3, and it is tax-deductible, and a small amount, 5%, is administered for because they are a fiscal sponsor. So this is, and we have on the table, if you can't make that now, there are some envelopes in which you can fill out a form and mail it in later. So please do that. Thank you very much.
Next, we want to invite everyone to stay for a panel discussion where we'll take questions from the audience. One of the panel members who I'd like to acknowledge is Hanan. Hanan has come down from Seattle. He is an Iraq veteran against the war, and so we definitely like to acknowledge our veterans who are sacrificing so much to exercise their conscience, rather. Now, what we want to stress is that during this time, we're going to, hopefully, I'm going to check this mic. You say, testing, yeah. You can all come up to the mic, or, I don't know, there's actually even, I think, a small enough group. If people want to put their chairs in a circle, we can have this more of like a round table. You know, we can sit like that and have a discussion. What we'd like to stress is that that you pose these as questions or topics of conversations rather than statements. You know, we all get very passionate about this issue, and some people like to go on and on. Okay? So, right now what I'd like to do then is invite our panelists up, and each one of them will introduce themselves to the audience. Instead of doing the microphone, if people want to kind of move up closer or more in a circle, and we have a small enough group that we can do that, you know, more of a round table community discussion. Come on down. If somebody feels like they need the microphone.
It's nice to use the mic to get it on tape.
Oh, it's nice to use the mic to get it on tape. I'm sorry. Well, come on up here anyway, and then everybody's closer to the mic, and whoever wants to then pose a question. Come on up. Do you want to line up? That works. I'll step away from the mic, so you know. Good, everybody?
I just had a question for you, Agustin. On what grounds does the military have for denying your appeal for confidential objector status? It obviously seems if someone has the courage to not load their weapon for 12 months in Iraq. My brother was in Iraq for 12 months too, and I talked to him about it, and he just can't even fathom being over there without a loaded weapon. So it just seems like you proved yourself enough to receive that status, and I was just wondering what they had to say and how they denied you.
Speak up.
And right after Augustine answers, I want to have everyone have an opportunity to introduce himself also.
Yes, that's a very interesting question that you ask, because in the report, it's a panel of 3 people at the Pentagon have the final say. So these guys, have never seen me or spoken to me. But anyway, they wrote on their report one sentence. They said that I was not convincing enough.
That was their argument, just one sentence. Let's talk about CL.
And I'd like Hanan to introduce himself, and Lori also, and Hanan can say a little bit also.
I just wanted to say that Augustine actually had the basis to file a lawsuit because they gave no reason for his denial. There was no reason. That's why we were able to file a lawsuit. But of course, when they sent it back to the Army, the court remanded back to the Army for review, they came back and again gave a no reason. And then the judge said, well, you have to give a reason. And then they said, it just wasn't convincing enough. And the judge accepted it as a good enough reason.
And I'm Hanan Suarez-Diaz. I'm the president of the AWRX World Chapter in Seattle. I just invited a panel in support of, a great war resistor. As, all veterans have been through it, combat veterans, and it's a great honor to be here.
Hi, my name is Lori Hurlebaus. I am a member of Courage to Resist, an organization whose primary purpose is to support soldiers who refuse to fight and or are speaking out. So generally supporting the growing GI resistance movement within the military. And not paired with doing a recruitment work because it's the most effective way to end the war. So I'll take on the CO question just a little bit. I don't know if I'm the best person to speak to this, but what I do know is that the conscientious objector status is a pretty arbitrary process within the military. The decision-making around it, there isn't, if the soldier meets this and this, then they are declared a conscientious objector. It's so much is up to the discretion of the command. So, and it's designed that way to be very difficult. It's a long process, as Augustine talked about. It's not, you're not very popular. You're, subject to harassment, and there's no clear definition of the process. As our law things go.
I don't know, one question. Did you want to also speak to the CO? Okay. You want to ask a question? This is one of our Spanish speakers, so he'll ask in Spanish. I know that Agustin, Helga, and I'm not sure about Hanan if you all speak Spanish, so.
Bueno, buenas noches, mi nombre es Guadalupe Pérez. Quiero presentarme como una persona que estuvo dentro del movimiento en Oaxaca y bueno, lo que quiero es felicitarlos a todos ustedes que están aquí al frente y tenemos que trabajar sobre todo su apoyo para ir ganando terreno en contra de lo que es el gobierno capitalista y neoliberal, que no relaciona mucho lo que comentaba de lo que, bueno, no es, digamos, buen político, pero en materia lo que sufrió, lo que vio, eso es lo que cuenta y quiero también solicitar en una próxima evento para ir haciendo más grande el trabajo, porque es cierto, mucha gente no sabe, mucha gente no cree, pero tenemos que ir trabajando para ir abriendo la conciencia, despertando la conciencia de nuestra gente pobre, que ellos nosotros somos los que estamos sufriendo por el sistema del gobierno capitalista. Y bueno, soy del estado de Oaxaca, México, y gracias a la invitación que me hizo aquí la traductora, es un placer estar aquí presenciando en este evento. Es una maravilla porque aquí enriquecemos más el ánimo moral y la conciencia de que tenemos que luchar en contra de la represión. Gracias.
My name is Guadalupe Perez. I'm from the state of Oaxaca and have been involved in the people's struggles in Oaxaca, Mexico. It's an honor to be here tonight to listen to all of the panelists. It reminds me that we need to keep making bigger events like this and more efforts to be able to awaken the consciousness of more people, because there's a lot of people who don't understand, who don't believe, who don't get what's going on, but we need to continue to fight against neoliberal and capitalist governments and continue in our struggle.
I heard a rumor that Agustin, you were a socialist. Is this true? And if so, could you tell us how you came to that belief?
Okay, speaking politically, I'm like a toddler. I'm no expert in political science. I'm not a socialist yet, but I think that definitely there's issues that before I've had this experience, I realize there's many issues that affect the working class, and these issues I am very concerned with, immigration and as an immigrant, and others as well.
Well, just to go on that, I am a socialist, and basically, I mean, in Iraq, I was a liberal Democrat, but I was wounded there 2 weeks before I was supposed to leave. And one thing, when I was home and I was raised in Miami, I'm a part of the International Socialist Organization also. And there's this magazine called the International Socialist Review, and on the cover it had a Vietnam veteran with a Kevlar. On his Kevlar said, "War is hell," and that really spoke to me. And I didn't really know what real socialism was. We're not talking about like Cuba or Castro. And I opened it up, and it really opened my mind, and it just all made sense to me on like the nature of the system and imperialism, and just how the inner workings of like racism, how that all is used to control people. And even in Iraq, in the military, I mean, there's institutionalized racism towards Arabs and Muslims, and it's a way to dehumanize and to divide people. And here in this country also, you have, the attacks on immigrants, and that's another form of, weapon that, we call the ruling class to divide us working class people into, scapegoats. So, yeah, that's basically is my experience in Iraq that radicalized me, and that's hence I became a socialist. So.
One of the things that Appalachia for a long time here at Portland State University, was one of the founding members of the Metro Student Group here, which is a Chicano organization. The thing is that we've been trying to bring together, and I want to get a feel from you, is that we have this division that is happening in this country, which is racism. But a lot of the resources that are being taken away because of the war are not funding the resources in our communities. And at the same time, we have the Latino community, which is being targeted for service, and even asking the undocumented to join the service and become citizens. And yet, at the same time, we're talking about some of the great leaders in the anti-war movement are Latinos. And how are they speaking to the Latino community? What is your response when you speak? What is the feeling you get back from the Latino community?
Like you saw on the video, my husband and I, we go into the high schools, the at-risk high schools, and the Los Angeles school district. And it's amazing. The teachers say, oh, be very scared, watch your purse, and everyone there is either black or brown. And we go in there, we talk to them, play a movie, Arlington West, which is back there if anyone wants a copy of it. And you can hear a pin drop. They're listening, they want to hear. And I think it's because we don't go in there as adults telling them what to do and what not to do, but we just listen to their concerns, and we tell them about our story, the human side. We basically tell the story we shared here tonight. And we ask in the very beginning, how many of you have family members in the military? They raise their hands. Most of them do. And then we ask, how many of you are thinking of joining the military? And a lot of them raise their hands. But once it's over, a questionnaire is given to them, and there's a question on there that says, has this changed your opinion? And we get almost 100% change. And so, to know that people care. When Agustin was in prison, I would go by myself, and I would read a letter that he dictated to me over the phone, over 3 phone calls, so that I could read to the students. And the letter essentially said, you can be anything you want to be, and there are better things that you can do than join the military if you want to help your community, if you want to be leaders. There are other things that you can do, and I think that's our message to the kids, and it's empowering to them, and we see how they just light up when they're told, that they have the capability of making change and making their communities better. So we're very honored and humbled to have the privilege to go into the schools and speak to the children.
I just want to say real quick, I think it's very important. I personally think it's important that the anti-war movement joins and links with the immigrant rights movement, because of the fact that you have, if you look at the African American community, they're not recruiting them. That community has gotten it, that they're recruiting out of working class, poor neighborhoods of color, rural areas, and the Latino community. We need to inject that idea that you can't. Basically, they're using you, and there's plenty of Iraq veterans that, as you said before, have joined, just become citizens, and with the racism that's running rampant in this country towards undocumented workers or just Latino or whatever. I think it's very important that the anti-war movement links hand, and makes that connection, because that would be a true grassroots, multicultural, strong movement, and that's with that whole bridging of, how they divide us through racism and homophobia and sexism. It's a hard process, but we got to do it to bridge these together, and that just makes us even more stronger movement.
not Latino. So I feel like I'm not going to speak directly to the question, but I'm going to offer a resource, which is it's a movie called The Short Life of Jose Antonio Gutierrez. It's the story of a young Guatemalan boy who makes his way to the United States and ends up joining the Marines to gain citizenship. And I think what was really interesting for me in seeing that film was seeing how the hand of the U.S. government, helped create the conflict in the country from which he was fleeing, and in that process is feeding its own military machine. So I would highly recommend that. It through this one story, I think it just makes a lot of the links. And the fact is that people don't, gain citizenship faster unless they die usually. So.
I just want to add that, there's a lot of misconceptions that we need to clear up, share with people. The reality of getting those benefits in the Army, immigration, recruiters might try to promise things, but in reality they can't really offer citizenship to people.
I actually just wanted to comment that when all this happened, the military actually wanted to take away Agustin's citizenship, but they couldn't because he didn't get it through the military, but they tried.
Augustine, how did the soldiers and officers in your unit respond to your refusal to longer fire your weapon? And how were you able to survive for over a year in Iraq without firing your weapons? And that's my first question. And my second question is, what is the morale of the U.S. soldiers in the unit from your experiences while you were in Iraq? And is there a growing awareness among them that they were lied to, that this war is wrong, and they, if they have the courage, they would want to resist it? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. That's two questions or two issues. So the morale is low. I would have to honestly say, because stop loss is something that really hurts. These young men, they put themselves out there, they risk everything, they re-enlist. They're not expecting to be, not hoping that something like that would happen. Extensions from 12 months to 15. So I would say morale is definitely low. And the soldiers in my unit are really struggling right now. The bond that exists inside the military is extremely strong, and they use that to their advantage. The buddy system, the camaraderie. That's how they survive. I've had one of my sergeants told me, the only reason I go there is so that when we get back, we can have a beer. And it works, it's working for the Army in that sense. But resistance is definitely growing. It's going to grow even more. I'm convinced of that. Two days before I came back to the States, there was a young soldier in my unit who was being pressured to go back to Iraq. He was healing from an injury in his feet. He wasn't ready to go back. He was being pressured, forced, so he left Canada. I completely respect that. You just have to go to resist the website to realize that yes, there's a growing war. How did I survive in Iraq without loading my weapon? I tried to be one that would drive all the time, so I would just shove my weapon to the side.
I guess I was lucky. I guess I'm just incredibly lucky to be back. But I think of the soldiers right now, and I'm so lucky.
We're all like, no, I want to answer that. I'd just like to speak a little bit about the resistance within the military, and then I think Hanan really wants to as well. I'd like to point out that, you know, the resistance within the military is definitely growing, and there is a GI resistance movement. You know, the people on Courage to Resist have made the decision to, you know, to make their stand or their resistance public. But I can't tell you the amount of soldiers that in various ways are resisting. You know, resistance isn't just about making that public stand. You know, it's from writing, you know, anonymously, doing music, you know, you name it. Soldiers are resisting, and it's growing. But I think with the public resistors, you know, we have an opportunity and a responsibility to show soldiers that if they do resist, that we're going to be there for them. You know, it's a long, difficult process, but, you know, if we, as a movement, support these public resistors and show other soldiers that if you do that, you're going to be taken care of, your families are going to be okay, you're going to be okay, then I do believe more and more will resist. And I'd like to pass it to Hanan, because I think, you know, he probably wants to talk about Iraq veterans against the war.
Yeah, there is definitely a being, you know, I was there in Iraq for 6.5 months. I was with a medic, just like Agustin, but with the Marine Corps Infantry, and my battalion is in Iraq right now. I was stationed in Ramadi. The military is so stretched thin right now, and people are so pissed because they know they've been screwed over. Stop loss, you know, involuntarily extending their contracts. All these things, you know, the stress of them being in a combat situation, and then, you know, their family at home, you know, they're, you know, suffering. They're about to break. The thing is that here, we have to look as the anti-war movement. We're not strong enough yet, and we have to build this movement. And GIs have to lead that movement, because ultimately, when you get soldiers to refuse to fight in Iraq, which there are Iraq veterans that are actively organizing in Iraq at this moment, you know, you get that, and you get, you know, veterans that come back, combat veterans speaking out against the war, and you have that strong anti-war movement to build, you know, the confidence. They know that we've got all these people behind us, you know. It's going to dispel a lot of the fear that's what keeps the military together. It's fear. And for what this man has done, I mean, I could not fathom being in Iraq. I mean, medics, I had an M16, and I only shot my weapon 5 times over there. And I couldn't imagine not, you know, loading my weapon just to defend myself. I mean, that's a very courageous thing. And there is a movement. We have to work here in building the anti-war movement and reaching out to active duty soldiers. You know, don't let the right wing, you know, dominate the argument that, oh, if we're against this war, we're against the troops. You know, that's BS. You know, we are for the troops. We want you to come home alive and not die for this imperialist war on oil and empire. And we also have to acknowledge that we still have resistors in Canada also. And we have to, I mean, it's a long process. I mean, the war isn't going to end in a couple of months. But we have to, it's a patient struggle that we just have to keep on building. And we can't burn ourselves out. And it's a long fight. I mean, we're talking about the U.S. government and oil. And just strategic positioning, you know, capitalism. I mean, it's a lot of deep stuff, you know. We have to keep, you know, keep the struggle. But it's there.
I'm going to take this in a little bit different direction for a minute. It's related, but about the case in particular, I'm sure that you've, through your lawyer and through other activists, you've probably been made aware of the history of conscientious objection, both before being in the military and once you're in the military in the United States. I mean, during the Civil War, if you were in the military and you declared yourself a conscientious objector, you were summarily executed. it is the political struggle like you're going through and the legal struggle like you're going through that began then and has continued war to war to war that has gained more rights. So you're at that point. You're at the leading edge of this now. And so what I'm wondering, both of you have talked a lot with the lawyers involved, I'm sure. I don't know if Lori or Hanan have talked to the lawyers about this case in particular very much. So I expect this is for Agustin and Helga. What is their assessment of your chances to actually affect even the smallest change? Because most of the court cases that go to the Supremes affect, they just nick off a little section of a bad law, or they reinterpret a little section. And how have they laid that out to you? What is the precise hope for what, because what you're doing, yes, it's very personal, but I knew plenty of people in the Vietnam era whose cases would redound to the futures of 30 or 40,000 young men at once. If they made it to the Supremes, it has a huge effect. So I'm wondering what is going to be, what's at stake here. We sort of know a little bit about what's at stake for you, although that hasn't been made entirely clear. I'd love to hear what that is for you personally, but also what is their assessment of your chances of winning, and how are they going to approach it, and what do they hope comes out of this? Thank you.
Okay. As far as Augustine, our family, it can't get any worse for us. Augustine, I mean, we have risked everything, financial ruin. Augustine has 2 felonies, and we still don't know how that will interpret into the civilian world if he goes and looks out, tries to apply.
I teach in the master's program in conflict resolution here, and I've got 2 felonies, so
okay.
There's plenty of
that's great. That's great news. Okay, so for us personally, it can't get any worse. And right now, I think we feel on top of the world, so that we'll be okay. As far as the legal aspect, we're supposed to have a meeting with the attorneys. Augustine has never met the attorneys in person. We have had conversations with them over the phone for years. And we just lost our appeal on June 6th, which means that the Circuit District Court of Appeals in Washington, D.C. Did not want to hear this case again. They've heard it 3 times, and they've had enough. Our only recourse is to go to the Supreme Court. That's the case where we're demanding that the court consider Augustine a conscientious objector. We have a very small chance of succeeding. If we succeed, then, well, Augustine's felonies do go away. The court-martial would, didn't happen. Essentially, that's what happened. But there isn't enough precedence in conscientious objection for the judges, for the lawyers to speculate concretely what exactly will happen. This is a case that will set precedent, and it could potentially set a bad legal precedent if they find that Augustine, in fact, is not a conscientious objector. As Lori mentioned before, it's a very hard process. The GI rights counselor in Germany said that he reviewed all the cases that they've had. They had ours, which we failed, and 5 that have been successful since. And they said that they looked at all of them, looked at the applications, and thought that Augustine's was the best. But couldn't find a standard, couldn't find something that says, okay, these 2 did this, or that one did this. There's no standard. It's like, they put the names in the hat and picked one and said, this one will be a CO. So there's no standard, and so it's really unclear. We're treading, waters that haven't really, it's all new. We have a great team. We have the top attorneys in conscientious objection. They are from Philadelphia. We also have a renowned attorney from the Civil Rights era, Vietnam War era, Mike Tiger, who has joined our team, and he isn't charging us for that. These lawyers are really dedicated to the case. They're not, although they're not doing it pro bono, they are doing their best to represent Augustine and gain a victory, but we just don't know. That's one case. We have another case that right now is in the UCMJ courts, military courts. And that one is for Augustine. It's an appeal because he got convicted as a deserter. With that case, it's in the appeals process. We have an attorney assigned from the Pentagon that we've never met, never had contact with, and that process will take up to 2 years. And during that time, Augustine is still considered active duty and still falls under all the, he has to abide by their code of conduct and all that good stuff. So that's the other case that we can potentially pursue. And Kevin Benderman's attorney, his name is Casara, has offered to help us with that. But again, it's not pro bono, and we have to consider and weigh all these options. And so I'd like to give you a concrete answer, but it's really, there isn't enough cases that have gone to the Supreme Court to know what exactly will happen. It could go either way, and even if we go to the Supreme Court doesn't have to accept the case. So, which was something that I didn't know initially when we started this whole process. I just thought we'd go from court to court to court, and surely someone would give us justice. But we found out really quick that that's not what has happened with us.
No, I think in the last session they granted cert to 60 out of 3,000 cases. I mean, your chances. So you don't know what your chances are for that?
No, we don't know our chances, and it's been rocky for us. 2 of the judges that we had on the 3-panel, the last appeal, they were the same judges that said that in Guantanamo Bay they didn't have the right to habeas corpus. So these were our judges. And then the prior federal court case in the federal court, we had a judge appointed by Bill Clinton, who was a liberal Democrat, and a month before he made his ruling, it was given to an ex-infantry officer appointed by Bush Sr., and we lost the case, and he was the one that accepted the no reason. And so it's really not a fair system. Just so everyone knows, we can't give any new evidence. The fact that Augustine didn't have a loaded gun for 12 months is not part of the record. It cannot be part of the record. Yet the military can submit new evidence. Like they submitted the fact that Augustine got a promotion, which he didn't ask for. They just gave it to him automatically in his 2nd or 3rd year. It's automatic. They gave him that promotion, and they used that against him in court. They also used against him in court the fact that he got the combat medic badge in Iraq, which he didn't want, and he told his command that he didn't want it. But the soldiers that were in Iraq that got it, all the medics got it, were outraged that he didn't get it because he was a conscientious objector. So they fought for him to get it. And after the ceremony, they all pinned their medals on him and said, "You deserve it, we'll fight for you." And he said, "No, I don't want it." They get him the medal, and then they use that in court against him. Well, obviously, he's not a conscientious objector because he got the the combat medic badge. So, they've also falsified affidavits. We've read the affidavits, we've read all the documents, and there's bold lies in there. There's actually one affidavit from the commander that said that Augustine was so crucial to the war on terror that if he didn't go, we might lose the war on terror. So it's absurd. And the judge accepted that. So, I mean, it really is, we're fighting an uphill battle. That's the truth of the matter. But we're still fighting. And we'll make a decision if we'll go to the Supreme Court. We have to have a meeting with 6 attorneys in August. So we'll see. We'll see if which battle we'll pick, or if we'll pick both.
Yeah.
That was a long answer.
Hi, my name is Linda Marshall, and I'm with Military Families Speak Out. So we're family members of and one of the things that I'm concerned about in terms of the not cultural, but sort of the problem that is created here is I don't see options for kids in high school. I think that we classified our system so much that there's rich and the middle, there's not much middle class. So there's not funding for programs like Vista and AmeriCorps that could give people another chance. My son too wanted to do something important, but there were not many roads to do things that were important that were available to him. Certainly nothing that would give him a college credit or even pay anything. And I think that really has to be changed so that kids have options to do service and find themselves if they don't want to go to college or can't afford it. And they should get credits and they should get money for that, just as soldiers do. So.
Regarding that, I'd like to say that I think we have to, we have a lot of work, but I think we also need to maybe pioneer those efforts. I know that Fernando, Guerrero Azteca Project, Fernando Suarez El Solar, he was on that little short movie. He actually, last time we saw him, he said his organization was practically bankrupt, but he still supplies, I think it's 3 scholarships a year. He finds the funding for it, and I think that we can all work towards the possibility.
Hi, my name's Hunter, and I'm a Vietnam veteran, and I was a member of VVAW, Vietnam Veterans Against the War. I'm a member of, and I wanted to and I also work now, I'm a union organizer for the American Federation of Teachers. And I wanted to say thank you personally for your work and your courage. Okay, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart, is that it takes a lot of courage to do what you all are doing. And I appreciate that, and I want you to know you have a lot of support out there in the general public, okay, for your actions. So the other thing I want to know is I want to know how I can get an attorney named Tyler. But, not really. During the Vietnam War, there was a division that grew between the enlisted people and the officers and career enlisted people. And the division grew very sharp as the war continued. And I was wondering if you all experienced the same thing. My brothers up here who were in Iraq, if you all are experienced the same phenomena in Iraq, and does that division exist, and is it growing? And then the second question that I had, and one of the things that I think is really troublesome about this war also, is the growth of private military contractors. Yeah. And your experience with private military contractors and the morale among private military contractors and what that was like. Because I think also during the Vietnam War, part of the movement, part of the GI movement, had to do with a movement for democracy. And a movement that if we were going to fight the war, we needed to have a voice, okay, in what we were going to do or not do. And so I was wondering if, in fact, you all saw, I wondered what you saw when you were in Iraq related to that, the morale of military contractors, and also the divisions within your own ranks, and how those were beginning to shape themselves.
Well, I was enlisted, and my particular situation, my platoon, there is, the military is the most clear example of the class society that we live in. It's very blatant. You have the enlisted, you have the officers, you have the officers that, get everything the best, and you have to study these people that, had a 4-year degree on depending on what, or it could be anything, and, they make these people officers. And then you have the enlisted that are the majority, and we're the ones that work all day and produce everything, and we're treated badly, and we still have to give these people respect. When I was, there's always been a division and a disgruntled feeling towards officers. It was in Vietnam, and then it exists today. Every now and then, you hear about fragging, like in the barracks and stuff, because we heard about that happened in Vietnam. Now, if it's happening in Iraq, it might be happening, but it's not something that is, you know, the military is going to publicize, you know, and I don't think, I mean, it's happening a lot if it is happening. My particular platoon, I mean, we had, I want to say, like a little mini mutiny. I mean, I was in an all-enlisted platoon. My platoon commander was a gunnery sergeant. I was with the Infantry and Marine Corps, and my commanding officer wanted our platoon, since he was a gunny and all the rest of the commanding, you know, all the other platoons had officers, they wanted to send us on a death mission. And it was a death mission on foot, you know, it was like a squad, and then me, the corpsman, with them, and they wanted us to do the same exact route that this other squad and a battalion prior that we relieved in Ramadi, they were completely wiped out. And they wanted us to do the same thing. And that, I mean, in that given time, and we had like less than a month left in Iraq, and everyone was like, especially me, because I've always had a big mouth, and I was like, look, I don't think this doesn't feel right. We're gonna get killed, you know, and then that spreads really quickly, you know. And 15 minutes prior to when we were supposed to go, my platoon sergeant, he saw what was going on, and we weren't geared up or anything. We're still debating, like, and we didn't know, because it's something that, you know, in the military, you're going against an order. And we saw that there's a lot of people doing it, but we didn't know what was going to happen next. So we're just kind of like, okay, we'll just stand around and hope, you know. And basically that's what, I mean, the platoon sergeant, he saw, and he left to tell the gunny, and the gunny went and told the CO, and then all of a sudden, you know, the mission was canceled, you know. So that was a little mini victory for us, you know. But it's not, I don't think it's an isolated incident. I think this is happening a lot in Iraq, in many different forms, but it's just not getting out, you know, in the media, of course, you know, Fox and CNN, you know, they're not going to, you know, show all this stuff, but it is happening. There's still a lot of, I mean, I've never liked all this.
I'll speak briefly about contractors. To me, the contractors that I was able to speak with, it was all about money for them. They were willing to risk themselves for those high wages. And what I thought was really sad was that the people that were doing there were people that were brought to Iraq from the Philippines and Pakistan to do the laundry for the soldiers, and their wages were like $250 a month. The cooks. So that, I mean, that stood out to me as a great injustice. You know, here we are, the soldiers. You know, we get so much money, which is really unfair. You know, the combat pay is really nothing for, you know, risking your life. Then the private contractors from Blackwater and these places, they make, you know, over 100,000 a year, right? Then we have these hardworking people from third world countries making practically nothing.
I just want to thank you all very much for being here. I need to say some things, not to bring attention to myself, but to add to what has been already said, okay? Because I was a medic in Vietnam, and I got over there toward the end of the war, so I was seeing the homicides, the suicides, the rampant heroin addiction in my unit. So, you know, I hadn't been in my unit very long, and an enlisted man went up to an officer, and he killed him with an M16, just blew him away. This I went to registration and unzipped a body bag, and a soldier had taken a pistol and shot him in the head. Another incident, I got called out one night, and a heroin addict had taken an M16, put his to his head and it blew his brains out. And I had to go into tent and deal with all that. You know, I had blood all over me and some brains on my lap. And I lost 3 good friends as a result of being in Vietnam. My last friend hung himself in a motel room. Okay. And so, you know, these are just things that I needed to add to what you've already said. Okay, it's really important that this go on the record because it validates you and it also it forces me to bear witness, which I constantly do. And you said something that was very powerful earlier, and I don't know how many people in this room caught it, Augustine. And it's something you really need to elaborate on, and also you, if you have had similar experiences like this. You said that you were told, as a medic, to tell your people, your infantry people who were carrying M16s or whatever weaponry they were carrying, that if they shot somebody, to make sure they finished the job. Okay? So if you wound somebody, you just shoot them. Okay? That was done every day in Vietnam. You know, I don't know how many people in this room are aware of, but we committed atrocities every day in Vietnam. Okay? It happened every day. We bombed everything. We dropped napalm on everything. You know, we dropped Agent Orange on everything. I mean, there's. You said when you said that, you know, and you talked about how they told you that over here, you know, Geneva Convention rules don't apply. You know, that you shoot anything that moves, and that you inform your people as a medic that if you shoot somebody, to finish the job. You really need to elaborate on that. That is a very powerful, powerful statement, what you just said. Because it's that kind of evidence that makes you, because what you did as an eyewitness is you're bringing stuff out of the closet that the military does not want to surface. Those kind of things. Because those are, that is basically him telling you that you're supposed to commit atrocities. Okay? You don't take any wounded. You know? And so, those are kind of things that need to be, that you need to write up, you need to really look at that on paper, put it on paper, and see how it looks. Because that's hardcore evidence that's very indicting to the U.S. government. You know? And so I can't impress upon you how important it is that you bring the nasty stuff to surface. Because that was the problem with Vietnam veterans, is that a lot of us didn't talk about the nasty stuff. And that's what you got to talk about. You got to talk about the stuff that goes against Geneva Convention rules, that are atrocities. I've had many of my friends that were involved in atrocities. Okay? I saw one incident where a soldier did something to a Vietnamese woman, and basically it was manslaughter. Okay, when they flew her in by helicopter, she had severe head injury, and he caused it. Okay, she died on the gurney. So it's just very important that you surface this, that you bring this stuff, because it's hardcore evidence. As painful as it may be to either one of you, it's stuff that's got to be put up, that's got to be put out on paper, because that is threatening. As I mentioned to you once before earlier, you guys are dangerous. Both of you. My war is over. I can get up here and talk all I want, and people will just shine me on because my war is over. But this war is still going on. You guys are the #1 threat to the U.S. government. I cannot impress upon you more of what I'm saying. You guys are dangerous to this government. And that's what's got to be brought to surface. You know,
Positive for that.
I want to ask you a question before we wrap it up. You know, as you've heard, we've had other fundraisers and events here for other IDAW members or military personnel who are suffering human rights abuses. And in your case, There's not just one mouth to feed, there's 4 here. And and Lori, maybe you can speak to this also, is that I really want to hear what your needs are, because I know you still have legal defense expenses, as well as you're on a tour, and if you can also talk about the tour. You know, where are you going from here? How long and how far does this tour extend? And, you know, I mean, how can we support you financially? How can we support you, you know, just as far as the cause and the morale and just being here as a community for you?
Well, we still have legal bills that have not been covered as of yet. We still owe $2,500 for the cases that have already transpired. And then we have the 2 cases that we can still take to court, and one has a fee of $15,000. The one where we have the team of attorneys that want to fight or may want to fight in the Supreme Court, and that's $15,000. And the other one is $8,000, and that's to get Agustin acquitted, essentially, of desertion and missing movement, which are the 2 felonies. And like I mentioned before, we don't know where we're going to go with that. And part of this tour is to raise the funds for that. But also, right now, Agustin, and I think it's a healing process for him. He went to Iraq and felt he didn't help, and now, when he came back from prison, I picked him up from the airport. He did a tour in San Francisco. When I picked him up, I'll never forget. It was just, he said, I have so much I have to do. I haven't done enough. And I'm looking at him like, are you crazy? You just got out of prison. What do you mean? And he wasn't well. And I didn't see him get better until he started going into the high school. And I see that every time he goes in and he convinces or he helps these young kids realize that there's better things in life than the military service, I see that he becomes more and more alive. And so that's what he's doing now. That's what he does right now. And we live off the honorariums that he gets when he goes into the high schools. And so we're essentially getting back on our feet. And, you know, this tour is to help us, but also for our legal fees. Because we do want to continue this fight, not just for us, but for the soldiers that refuse to fight and they find themselves in the same position that their conscientious objection applications were denied. And as far as anyone wanting to donate to our cause, you can log on to aguayodefense.org and click on the donate page, and on there it will direct you to a PayPal account, which is it's not tax deductible, and that goes directly to the family. Or it will direct you to a tax deductible donation site, which is courage2resist.org. They have been amazing. They helped us start this campaign here in Seattle and helped us get to the court-martial. Lori would call me just to see the attorneys they have been amazing. And she actually got me up to Seattle. I didn't want to go because the stress was really getting to me and I was really sick. And she just was amazing. And their organization helps, you know, all the soldiers that resist publicly and the ones privately. They help them too. And it's not just financial, it's moral support. It's, you know, they fill the gaps. And it's not easy for a family to go what we went through and to know that there was an organization that's supported by so many individuals like yourselves. And I can't tell you how much strength that gave us to continue each day, because each day was hard. And I guess Lori can talk more about the tour, but
They needs to eat. They need to have shelter, and you know, Agustin put everything on the line and doesn't have an income, and so I'm going to ask you to dig into your pockets again if you can, or if you know, spread the word about his case. And inform others and encourage others to donate to the Aguayos. Yes, this is a larger tour, so helping to spread the word to your friends up in the north would be helpful. We're going to Tacoma tomorrow night, then on to Port Angeles and Port Townsend. We'll be in Bellingham, Seattle, and Olympia. To find out the details of all of those dates, you can log on to couragetoresist.org/events, and that has the details of each of the events in the next week. So it's a long process and tiring for a whole family to do that, and so there are expenses with that also. So I encourage you to help spread the word so that we can do some fundraising for them.
I just want to thank everyone that's here for coming. I was really nervous at one point about coming back to the States. I had been gone for so long. You know, what are people going to think of me? But I've been very fortunate. Every time I see a group, I see supporters, I see Courage to Resist, IVAWs, my brothers, sisters too. The ISO, always there. Thank you. Thank you guys. Military families, speak out. Vets for Peace. I feel loved by all of you. Thank you. And if I missed any other activists, thank you. Thank you for welcoming me home. Thank you.
We're going to have karaoke after this, so if you want to stay and sing a song. No, I'm kidding.
Thanks, everybody. Anna wanted, come on up and make your announcement. I just want to say, we have 4 DVDs left of Beyond Treason. If you haven't seen this, it's a must-see as far as what our military is doing for drug experimentation and some information about depleted uranium use also. They're right over on this front table. There's 4 of them left. Adam?
Yeah, just if you're a PSU student and you're interested in organizing
anybody in this place.
How you doing, bro?
Busy, huh? Yeah.